What up, artists? My name is Dwayne Jones. I'm the creative director and founder of a lifestyle brand called Art Pays Me. This is the Art Pays Me podcast, and I'm passionate about finding ways that people like you and me can make a living for ourselves off of our creativity. And, maybe we can make the world a better place at the same time. Let's get into it. Welcome to Art Pays Me. Today we have Dylan Edwards. Dylan, tell us what you do.
I do all kinds of things for money. I work at an animation company in downtown Halifax called Copernicus Studios, and what I do for them is I'm their head of development, which sounds impressive, and it is impressive in a way. But it's not like I've got a corner office and like huge desk and stuff. But yeah, so Copernicus is they're an animation company. They do 2D animation. So we make cartoons for most of our clients are in LA. If you watch cartoons, and you've probably seen Teen Titans Go. That's one of the big jobs that they do, and we've been making that since season 1, and now it's up to season 7. And I worked on the feature as well, if you see that. So there's a lot of our work that's there. And I usually, when I'm explaining what the company does, I lead with that because it's the most visible thing that we do. But we're working on Curious George. We worked on a bunch of things. Some things for adult, some for kids, some preschool. So we've got clients like Disney and Netflix, Universal,
Right.
Nickelodeon, a bunch. So that's and they give me a paycheck to do development.
So that's crazy. How does like a company like yours end up connecting with these major brands?
Yeah. Well, it was a strategy from the get-go. The company's about 17 years old. I've been with them for about 9 years now. So there's the beginning of the company I wasn't there for. But it's owned by these 4 guys that started it, and they're still running it. And early on, they got some advice saying that because they knew how to do animation, and they got along well, and they decided let's have a go of it. Let's see if we can make animation for TV. And this was back like 17 years ago. Most animation like for TV was being done overseas, so they figured they were part of that whole kind of revolution, kind of digital revolution that happened back then when they started using computers to do television production animation. So they're a part of a whole wave. And there's a bunch of other companies that kind of figured this out at the same time. So they're one of those. But early on, they got some advice saying, you got to export. If you want to make a go of this and have your company grow, you have to be in LA. You have to meet the people that, the gatekeepers. You got to meet the people with the money. So they put some resources early on into going to international events. So there's a big one that was in New York when they started. They've moved it to Miami. It's called Kids Screen, and that's based. There's a Kids Screen magazine which covers everything to do with kids media, and they do this big trade show. And I've gone since I've been in this position. I've gone there a few times, and it's huge. It's and every major company, they send a rep there. So you'll meet with people from Disney and Netflix and everyone, and that people from all over the world too. So
Crazy.
There's a whole Chinese delegation and Korean and French and a lot of Caribbean. There's tons. It's all over the place. And everyone's trying to make shows. And there's a few of those events around the world. There's a few in France, and not only that, and they also, I think the other way when I'm thinking about how they connected with these LA places is it's you hear it a lot. It comes down to networking, right? Like you treat people right, you make good relationships. they move on because animation and film, it's like a gig kind of situation, right? Like you're working on something intensely for 6 months, a year,
Yeah.
and then it's over and they go their separate ways. So during that time, if they like you and you like them and you stay in touch, they remember you, right? So
Right.
early on, there's some people they worked with that went to LA and said, "Oh, you guys are working on this? Well, I know this great shop out east. You should give them a call." And so
It
there's
just
been a
keeps
lot of
going.
that. Like, yeah, you just and that was a lesson I learned early on is just be cool to everybody because
Mm.
just because it's the right thing to do, but also because as a business strategy, someone maybe they're getting on your nerves,
Yeah.
maybe they're a little too much in your face, maybe they're kind of boring or whatever. But if you just tell yourself, no, just you know, don't be like that, don't go there.
Yeah.
You never know because that person suddenly, not suddenly, years later, maybe they're working someplace and uh, and they're like, yeah, do you know anyone that can do this? And they give you a call. Sometimes it works out. So
So like, are you well, I'll step it back a bit.
yeah,
How has the quarantine been for the business? As I see, like, animation is probably getting a bump, I would assume, in this climate.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of talk about that, and yeah, and well, in terms of the like, we get contracts essentially,
Hmm.
and we haven't really missed a beat with those. We're still making all our deliveries because even when things were quote unquote normal, um, it's a solitary thing. We would just do it together. So we
Yeah.
had a studio, rows of computers, and everyone's got their headphones on and they're just doing their thing, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of getting the work done, it's not that different to do that at home. There was a bit of a wrinkle, just because when we're doing work for a company like Netflix or Disney or something, they put in place, they want to be assured of security basically.
Mm.
So there's certain standards you have to do to your space that you're working in, and your computer network, the way it's set up, because they don't want their stuff to get pirated, right? Like you're not
Yeah.
working on your own property, you're working on their show.
Yep.
Um, so we had to say, as it looked like this COVID thing was getting serious, we kind of reached out and say, hey, you know what? We're just preparing a plan for getting everyone to work at home. It's gonna need an adjustment to this agreement, and they were totally cool with it. So basically, after about a week, we had everyone working from home, and it's going great. So, and then yeah, like the other thing you're saying is the all the live action stuff is shut down, right? Like you
Hmm.
can't, for health and safety, you can't have all these people working in close quarters anymore. So, but animation is going. So yeah, there's a lot more demand for animation because people still want to work. All these companies, they've still, the networks, they've still got airtime to fill. They still need more content. So
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. Uh, so were you actually self-taught, or did you go to school for animation?
yeah, originally I was self-taught, and then at a certain point, I went back and retrained. But yeah, when I was a kid with my dad, he had a Super 8 camera.
Mm.
I don't know if you know much about film.
A little bit.
Back.
Real film.
Yeah. Yeah, so there was this format of film called Super 8 because it was 8 millimeter. It was really tiny. And a lot of home movies were on Super 8 film. And when he was a teenager, he did stop motion stuff for like special effects. He'd make sort of sci-fi films with his buddies and
Mm.
shoot miniatures and things like that. So when I was a kid, he just carried that on with me. It was a thing we would do together. And we did like Terry Gilliam style animation where we'd use like paper cutouts and have the
Okay.
camera on a tripod and kind of uh, and then I just kept going with that when I was a teenager. I made films with plasticine and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah. And then when I got older, I just sort of, it was like a thing I knew how to do. But and I experimented a little bit with digital cameras when they came along. but I didn't really think much of it. It wasn't really what I went into when I went to college. I took theater
Mm.
and did a bunch of things. I worked with, actually later, I worked with my dad as a graphic designer. I
Cool.
worked at the library, so my career was all over the place, but it wasn't really animation until around 2000. One of my friends from college he went to theater, but he studied lighting, and he was more into like the camera side of it. Because a lot of people, they would go to Dal Theater and take lighting because they wanted as a way to get into film, basically.
Ah.
Because you're learning, it's the same gear, right? So you're learning lighting and sound and stuff like that. So he did that, and he ended up being a camera lights guy on this stop motion production. There was an outfit in Toronto called Cup of Coffee he was working at. And then Halifax Film, around then, they were setting up this big studio here in Halifax. And it was a stop motion show called Poco, which maybe is still on CBC. I'm not sure. It was a while ago.
I remember it back in the day, though.
Yeah, kid with blue hair, and yeah, and he had a magic finger. He'd draw things in the air and make them real.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was this. So they moved into what is now, the Nova Scotia Power Building down on the waterfront. But at the time, they were using it as a sound stage, Halifax Film. And so they put a whole studio in for stop motion. And just in case anyone doesn't know what stop motion is, it's when you have a camera set up and lights, and you're shooting a miniature of some sort, and you move it a little bit. It's not always a miniature, I should correct myself, but you're moving things a little bit at a time and taking one frame at a time. And so they were doing this show Poco, and we had a whole puppets department and a whole props department and sets, and it was a whole huge production. But animators were hard to come by. They scoured the country, and they had like 8 animators or 9 animators, and I think a couple of them maybe didn't work out or something. This was before I got there. But in any case, word went out that, hey, we need more animators. And my buddy called me up and said, you do this stuff, right? Why don't you try out? And at first I thought he was kidding. I'm like, yeah, right, sure. Yeah, like someone's doing that in Halifax. They're doing a stop motion show, right? And then it was like a couple months later, he was at my place for Christmas. He's like, so did you go try out? I'm like, I thought you were kidding. So I was like, no, man, we really need animators, and there's no one. So I went and tried out for it, and I walk in that place, and it just blew my mind.
Wow.
There's this huge place full of cameras, and there's lighting people going around, and computers everywhere, and there's a director and whatever. It was like a real production, and I was, a little bit kind of Bambi in the headlights a bit, like, I hope I can, a bit of, imposter syndrome.
Sure.
But then the director, he walked in when I was, they put you in a booth and here's a puppet and just do something, just do some tests, and that's how they're going to decide who gets the job, right?
Mm.
And at one point, the director popped his head in and said, so you want to work here? I'm like, yeah. And he said, well, then and he was, I think, being a little sarcastic, but he said, just show your face here as much as possible. But I took that to heart. So I went, and I forget what I was working at the time, part-time at the library, I think, or something. But I booked the week off, and I just went down there every day and animated as much as I could. And then the producer later, she told me that she picked me because they're just going through the footage of all the people that were testing out, and I did something that just made her laugh. And I think there's like these little characters out of wire.
Yeah.
And they're walking along. So I had one like step in dog crap. Like I made a little ball of plasticine, had him step in it and then go, and then try and scrape it off his shoe and act like it was stinky and stuff. And it made her laugh. So then, she said, all right, hire that guy. And that was my way into the animation industry. And that was, like about 20 years ago.
Huh.
And so then that was stop motion. So they did Poco, and then Halifax Film did Lunar Gym. And when I was at Halifax Film, I don't know if this is getting too inside baseball, but Halifax Film got bought by another company, Alliance Atlantis, and they went through a bunch of transformations, eventually ending up becoming DHX.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there during all that. DHX, as you may or may not know, is now Wildbrain. Yeah, so they did 2 stop motion series, and then they switched the way they were making shows to CG. So, the shows they made after that were like Bow on the Go and Animal Mechanicals, Inspector Gadget. So they're that kind of, it's kind of like Pixar kind of animation. It's 3D.
Yep.
So when they made that switch, I had no idea how to do that. It's very technical.
Mm-hmm.
But while I was on Lunar Gym, I did start writing, and again, I just sort of kind of pushed my way into that. Like the script editor, who's kind of like the showrunner basically for animation. We both smoked at the time, so I'd end up out back smoking with him and chatting him up and stuff. And he and I found out, they're running out of scripts, which is a huge problem on a production. Mm. I don't know if you talk to a lot of people working in TV.
No.
But on a feature or a short film, you've got a script and you budget it and you figure out how you're going to get that script shot. And, it's tight, you got your budget and your time and things have to go smoothly. And then TV is like that, like times 50, right? Mm. You're doing 50 shorts, basically. And the money for the production, it all gets released at once, right? So, I mean, you'd think, because with a feature, you write up a script and then you start shopping it around and trying to find the money for it, right?
Yeah.
But with a TV series, you don't have those 52 scripts written. Like, that's a lot of work. So you got to pay those writers to do that. So usually when you're trying to get that show going, you have like a couple of scripts and you have some test footage and, you're showing that to, like, say, CBC. And when they're like, yeah, okay, let's make this show, it's more complicated than that, but basically you piece together the financing. But then it all comes at once. So what I'm getting at is that the production was getting light on scripts. It was like, oh, crap, we're going to run out of scripts. So we're paying all these people. They're going to have nothing to do.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, man, I can write. I can do that. Give me a shot. And he was like, what have you written? I'm like, well, I went to theater school. I wrote some plays. I was like, eh. But then they got desperate enough to give me a shot. So I ended up writing a few scripts for them. So then I rolled that into when they were doing the CG stuff. I'm like, well, I don't know how to animate this, with computers like that. But so then I ended up writing a few scripts, that way. I was okay. Like, the scripts themselves are good money, but there's just, like, Halifax is it's not that big for TV. Like, if I want to make a living as a writer, I realized I'd have to move to Toronto or Vancouver. Mm-hmm. Just because if there's just one, it's like at the time there's just, the one place. So, unless I was getting a ton of scripts from them, there's no, I mean, I had a family and a mortgage and stuff. So I'm like, this isn't working. So, that's when I had to decide to go back to school and retrain. Mm-hmm. I should probably let you get a question in now and then.
No, that's cool. This is great.
Yeah. Well, when I went to at the time it was Center for Arts and Technology.
Yeah.
Became Da Vinci College. And I just went in for their animation program and learned the 3D animation. So I was learning all that stuff. And I didn't end up going into 3D animation. Like, there's a whole bunch of courses there. And I was sort of a mature student. Mm-hmm. Like, a lot of them were kids right out of high school and stuff. But I think I was 35, 40, I don't know. What was it? 10 years ago? I would have been 40. I'm 50 now, by the way.
Okay.
But so there was a course in storyboarding. Yeah. Which I was great at, if I do say so myself. Because I've always drawn and I do comics and things like that. And the teacher of it, the guy that was running it, he was actually directing a show at Copernicus. Okay. And so he's like, I need some board artists and you're great. Can I hire you? I'm like, yes. So I ended up starting before I finished the program. And then did I finish it? Yeah, I did. That's the thing about trade school, like you go and it's about getting a job,
Uh-huh.
like a certificate's great, and finishing something and achieving it, that's all, celebrating it, that's all awesome. But really the goal is to get a job, so, and a lot of people, they get hired as, that happened at Dow too, actually. People are in the lighting program and they'll start working and they won't finish their degree because they don't care, they're there to get a job. So
Yeah.
once your career starts, then you're off and running. But yeah, that's how I got in at Copernicus. Was I was doing storyboards for a show called Wild Grinders. It's about skateboarders.
Okay.
And that's when I connected with those guys, and then that relationship grew over time. I worked for them off and on at the beginning, and then I've been so since they made this position head of development. I've been there for solidly for 5 years full time.
So what is exactly development? Is that like kind of a blend of the storyboarding and the writing and kind of all of that stuff
Oh
together?
yeah. What is development? That's a big loaded question, because I mean, well, every industry, they've got development, right?
Mm.
If you go talk to someone in whatever forestry or baking or banking or whatever, they're going to have development, and it's essentially like figuring out new projects or new ways to make money or new businesses. In my case with animation, I'm developing IP, intellectual property.
Yep.
There's a lot of language around what I do that I find distasteful, but it's the water we swim in.
Yeah,
You just kind of have to go with it. Talking about your brand, or what's your target demographic, and IP and content and all those words.
Yeah.
Essentially, I, to keep myself grounded, I make cartoons. We tell stories. That's there's characters. That's what gives me joy, and that's what I focus on. But reality, when you get into it, how does a show get started? How do these projects get going? You have to talk that language, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because you're talking to money people.
Yeah.
I come from this theater background, and theater is this collaborative ensemble thing. Everyone from the props person, and the guy that sweeps the floor up to the director, they're all in that building, and they're all focused when it's showtime. Everyone's there to make sure that show goes smoothly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone understands it's about the script and all that, and that's great, and I love that. But with TV, it's definitely there's those people, and they're over here, and then there's the money people, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're bad, but it's different, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a big part of what I've been learning in the 5 years in this job, is figuring out how that works. How do you unlock those doors and get to those levers to unlock that money,
Yeah.
and get a production funded, like a show like Teen Titans Go. I don't know exactly what the budget is, because I'm not in that, but it's millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
At a television, like a typical, like an animated series, they basically go in like 52 episode blocks. That's what they buy, right? So to get that going, you put together a plan, like a schedule of, okay, it's going to take us 18 months. We're going to have 60 people. Here's what all their jobs are.
Yeah.
Here's what they get paid. You submit that to the broadcaster, and often they do what's called commissioning it, right? So they commission it, they pay for making it, and then who owns it when it's done, and all of that. There's like a whole variety of ways you can cut that pie, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then once you have your funding in place, then there's what's called the green light, right? So your show's green lit, and then that means, okay, we're good to go. We're gonna start spending this money,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got to deliver it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so development, essentially, what I've been pursuing is to try and get an original show going,
Right.
with Copernicus, because Copernicus, all of their work is service work, right? So we're making shows for Disney or for Warner Brothers or for these other people. They don't own those shows, which is I think we have to clarify a lot. And we're like, yeah, where did the studio that makes Teen Titans go? And they're like, oh, and they start pitching us ideas for episodes. And we're like, we don't
It's not
make it.
yeah.
We don't own it.
Yeah.
It's cool. Like, we love working on it, and we, put a lot into it, and we try and make it awesome.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of us in that show,
Mm-hmm.
but we're the tradespeople kind of.
Yeah.
We're not coming up with it. So that's my focus. Is I've been listening to, like, people have been pitching me ideas for shows. I've been listening to the guys that own the place. Like, I'd like to make a show like this or like that. So, and I'll end up putting together proposals for different new ideas, either for series or movies and things, and then going to places like Kid Screen and other things, and pitching these projects to people in the industry and trying to get things going. So the whole business side of it is that's been a learning curve I've been in.
Yeah.
And it's there's no hard and fast rules about how that works. It's business in its purest sense. Like, when I think about what are the rules of it, and I think about what it's the most like, I think it's most like poker. Like there's rules to poker, but the rules are like this much. They're just a fraction of what the whole thing is. It's a lot more about reading other people and getting the feel of the room and knowing when you have a good hand and how good it is, and knowing when to fake your way through stuff and all that.
Right.
Which you must know. You, with your Art Pays Me, is you get the whole business aspect of it.
Well, that's what I was actually going to dig into, because I love this IP conversation. I started to realize that, and that the whole language around this stuff, I don't actually love myself either.
Yeah.
But I started to understand the path to wealth, which I hate that too. For artists or creative types in general, is intellectual property in a lot of ways, because you even see it in the music industry. A lot of folks get record deals by giving away their intellectual property, and then the record label uses that property to generate even more money, and then they just dish out pennies to the artists while they continue to grow. So I started Art Pays Me with the concept. I mean, I'm a graphic designer by trade, so same thing. I might work on something big for a company, but I don't own it. I'm just doing the service work. Art Pays Me was like my intellectual property, my thing that I could, when it grows, I grow type of thing. So it's like finding that right balance of, something that actually belongs to me, but also mixing in those service work things to keep me going, keep me sustained. And I noticed you have your own intellectual property, The Last Human.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing I started working on, and I've been doing it for about 2 years now. Because I'm in the thick of this development thing, and it's cool and all. Like, I'm flying to France and Miami and meeting people, and it's a whole lot of talking about things, trying to explain creative ideas to money people. And at a certain point, I don't want to say I love my job. I don't want to say that it got me down or anything, but I was starting to feel like I needed a way to just be in the joy of creation without compromising it. Compromising is the wrong word. Without having to wait my turn, wait to speak, ask the right questions, frame it the right way, put it in this whole conversation about, the content and the marketing and all. Anyway, so webcomics is a great outlet for that. Like, it's this no holds barred, anything goes world out there where, you don't have a publisher, or a money person or a director or a producer telling you, oh, you know what, do it like this, do it like that. No, we're looking for this, we're looking for that. It's just whatever you want, you can just do. And if you read webcomics, there's all kinds, So I started, and The Last Human was an idea that I had come up with originally as a show. And then once I started digging into it, it got momentum in my head. Like as my writer's brain just kind of, I didn't know I had a writer's brain really until I got into it. And I guess I did know that, but it just got engaged. The characters and stuff. They started taking on a life of their own in my head, and I'm like, I gotta write this down. And so now, yeah, I kind of I've worked it into my routine. It's a good way to level me out and ground me. Is I'll do at least one frame of this comic per day. So if I get up early and the house is quiet, and I'll do my one drawing, or maybe I'll do it at the end of the day, so that I can update it each week. So each week there's a new update on the site of another page of the comic, basically.
Right.
And I'm doing it purely just because I like it. It happens to be my IP. And if someone makes me an offer, I'll have that conversation. But I'm not thinking that way at all when I'm working on it. It's the sci-fi thing. It's like a Star Wars. It's like a space opera. It's got aliens and robots and spaceships. And so I can just not worry about who is it for, who's the audience for this. If people like it, then great. And I would love people to like it because I like it. But it's very liberating to just leave all that business brain at the door and just draw cool robots and fights.
No, for real. I think that's important. Art Pays Me started out that way, then it actually became a real business. But but still, like, I find myself creating other side projects just so I can take that pressure away from a specific customer and a specific
I love that painting you did, actually. I wish I was a real person.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you did those progress images you were updating on Instagram, and I was following along like, wow, where is he going with this? And then it was it was really it's a really good piece.
Thank you. And it was one of those things too. But then my business brain kicks in, and I made a T-shirt out of it too. So
it's good just to have your different hats, right? You know what I mean? Like you have your artist hat on, and you're not thinking about business, and you're just making a good piece of art. And then, all right, that art's done. Now put on your business hat. Oh, hang on.
I could do something with this. Yeah. And that's kind of the way I hope to go in general. Like, I just want to be free to create. And if it turns out to be something that I could possibly add to the business, maybe I've added, maybe I don't. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, you hear these stories about like people who blew up in some way because of their intellectual property. But I find trying to force it just, you can't necessarily make it happen. It kind of just happens organically.
Well, and the risk is it sucks the joy out of it for you, right?
Yeah.
If the joy is gone, then ironically, you're not going to create anything of any value,
Right, exactly. Like you can kind of feel it when someone just authentically is living this or enjoying it. So with you, with The Last Human, is it the writing that you enjoy more or the image creation?
It's a good question. Because my writing process, like I've got the whole thing written down, but it's not a manuscript. Like I couldn't hand it over to like a publisher because it's nonsense right now. It's just notes. But I'll be doing something else. I'll be in the middle of dinner. I'll go, oh crap, that's a great idea.
Right.
I'll get out the phone and jot it down and then add it to my big master document. Just because, I feel when people write, I feel like, I don't know if you've done a whole lot of writing yourself, but with fiction anyways, you come up with a character and you think about what they're like. And at a certain point, you've thought about them enough that they become a separate kind of person in your head.
They're real, yeah.
And then they do things that, obviously it's all you, it's in your head, but it's like a piece of your subconscious is now carrying on without you. And so every now and then they'll do things that are surprising or really interesting or entertaining in some way. I think because I was working on this originally as like a show, and I was really put my whole effort into trying to bring it to life, enough of that energy went into it that when I stopped thinking about it as a TV thing and went on, they came back and they're like, hey, by the way, we got to defeat the robot empire here. I'm like, oh, okay, hang on. What did you say? And they write it down.
Yeah.
But there's a process where when I do the art and I'll draw them, because I've got my notes and I know, okay, what this scene is going to be like. The space pirates are boarding a ship and they're fighting other robots or something. And I'll kind of know what character things I want to have there. Like this guy's getting scared, and then this other one is like, hey, it's going to be okay, whatever the emotional content of that scene is. But I don't know exactly what the dialogue is yet or anything. So I'll do some sketches until I come up with a drawing I like. And then basically I work in pencil on a sketchbook. And then I'll photograph it with my camera and then email it to myself and bring it into Photoshop and finish it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I don't know if everyone works that way. I've talked to other people about that when they're trying to work on their own stuff. And I'm like, it's a big part of it is making sure you come up with tools and a method that fits in your life,
Yeah.
Like, okay, you may have this idealized way about, like, if I'm going to do a comic, I'm going to have a studio and a board, and I want these kind of paintbrushes and this and this. And okay, and if your life is set up that way, that you have those resources and that time, then great. But at the time I started this comic, I was traveling a lot. And so I knew I could just sit with a sketchbook and draw a few frames. Mm-hmm. And then I'd have my laptop with me so I could work on it while I was anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And it's turned into, now that I'm not traveling so much, with COVID and whatever, it's just a method that works for me. Like I can easily get into it and out of it. If I'm like, oh, I got an hour, I can knock out some drawings, right?
Yeah.
And because I've managed to fit it into my life, I've managed to, for a year, 2 years now, continually, put enough of it out. But to answer your question, but what part do I like the most? I see it all as one thing. Like when I think about the story, it's in my head and I can visualize it, like I'm a visual person. I don't really hear the voices until I've got the art done, and then I'm putting in the word balloons, and then I'm like, okay, and I'll have to think, put my head in their voices and come up with some dialogue that's fun.
Yeah.
Or revealing the character. And the other thing about webcomics, which is great, is that I never have to walk away from it, right? Like I've gone back to something maybe I did a few months ago and got, hang on, and I'll take that frame out and change the dialogue or something, or add a few frames and put it back in. It's sort of like a living document, so I can edit it on the fly, which is cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've tried writing novels before. Like I've had ideas for just like a book.
Yeah.
And I've come to the realization that that's just not me. My brain doesn't work that way. Like I always drew comics when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Even, like I made those films with my dad and stuff, but really that's all I did in high school. I didn't listen to anybody. I sat at the back of the room and just filled up my notebooks with just comics about whatever, superheroes and spaceships and whatever. And and then that's why I ended up, I think, doing being pretty good at storyboarding, was because I put in those 10,000 hours of time to get good at something.
Yeah.
And I don't know math, but I know I know how to draw comics.
Yeah.
So
my daughter she started out doing a lot of comic books, or comics, I should say. And then she got an iPod. She discovered she could illustrate. She illustrates everything on her iPod. It's like a tiny little screen. It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
And then she found these apps that allow her to animate them. So it's like, I don't know, she's like incorporating the stories that she had before into these.
That's great.
Little iPod illustrations.
Yeah.
And it's funny to me how it works. And I gotta now, this is making me want to sit down and talk to her about it, because I don't know how it works for her with the storytelling versus the image making.
Yeah.
But I just know she just seems to have this call to just do it. Like she just sits in her room for sometimes and just animating. Like, what are you doing? I'm making an animation.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy drawing. Like I find it meditative. Like it grounds me when I draw. So I mean, even if I'll practice life drawing. I should do more.
Huh.
But like life drawing, like being whatever, people or plants or
Yep.
the dog or whatever, furniture, just drawing something from life. I think of it like almost like push-ups, it's just like
Yes.
you're just doing maintenance. It just keeps your brain sharp because drawing is seeing, right?
Yep.
But when I'm drawing anything, not life drawing, but when I'm drawing other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
it's always storytelling for me. Like I
Oh,
can't
for
just
sure.
draw a character in a pose. I'm thinking about, well, who are they? What time is it? What are they
Yep.
doing? What are they looking at? What's going on in their life? And so I'm drawing a little moment in time. And it's a story.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's why the dialogue comes second, right? Like I'll draw it and then I can see it, and then I'll kind of in my head scrub back and forth through it until I can hear what they're saying.
Yes.
if that makes any
No,
sense.
that does make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I dabbled in comics in high school, and it was a
Yeah.
sort of similar thing. I just, for me, it was definitely the drawing first. It was like, but every character I drew, like they were a fully formed individual. I had the same
Yeah.
characters that I would always draw. They
Yeah.
had personalities. So when they were in a situation, a scenario in my head, like it was a whole thing that had happened for them to be standing there in that spot.
Yeah.
I guess it translates to my painting today because I wrote a big ass paragraph about that painting
Yeah.
because it's like everything yeah, everything in my mind. I mean, it just seems like it has to have that background story to it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, to me, storytelling is everything. Like I think business is storytelling.
Yeah.
Like you go into a meeting and I have to know, well, what character am I going to be? This
Mm-hmm.
person, I want to get this to happen, right?
Yep.
I want to get them to like this project, or this is a get to know you meeting, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a certain script or set of starting points for the improv,
Yeah.
of this meeting. And so, yeah, I'll build a character. I don't have to be me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a business guy, right? So I got my business hat on, but it's storytelling, right? So, hey, how you doing? And there's a certain rhythm to it. You get into it, and yeah, everything, cooking,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's all everything in life. To me, it's storytelling first and foremost, and that's how I make sense of life as I go through it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like, yeah, that's you think about industry, labor, things happen, what's human society is about, and so much of it's getting automated and
Yes.
changed with technology. But I guess computers can write stories, but you know
Eh.
I feel like, yeah. Well, it's the thing that people do that nothing else can do, is make things mean something, right? Make
Exactly.
things matter, and that's what stories do. You imbue a story into something, and it matters. Like if you pay more for free range eggs, it's because there's a story in that egg, right? It's like you're imagining this chicken's running around in a field and eating worms and having a good life.
Yeah.
They're being locked in a factory, just spitting eggs out onto a conveyor belt under a heat lamp. Like those are the two stories, right?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
one is like, I'll pay an extra dollar for these eggs because I like to feel good about the story here.
Yep. I know that chicken had a good life, or
Yeah.
like yeah. So tell me about the animation festival of Halifax.
AFX. I started that with Silouan. You met Silouan
Yes,
Daly,
I
I think.
did.
Yeah. Yeah. She and I started a festival. I think it was like 10 years ago. Sort of. I don't remember exactly the timeline, how it lined up with the Atlantic Film Festival, but Atlantic Film Festival, they stopped doing these animated short programs, right? And
Mm,
for me, that was the only reason I went.
right.
I've expanded my mind a bit since then, but I would be like, animated. The film festival comes up, I just flip to where's the animated shorts. That's what I wanted to go see.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've ever been to like an animated shorts program, but it's
Oh,
like a whole box of chocolates, right? You sit down and there's one after another, and they're all different styles of story, different people's visions, because animation is like that. You can take something right out of someone's head and see it, right?
right.
And so, yeah, you sit there for an hour, 2 hours, and you get to see, 10 different little visions of the world, right?
Mm.
But then, yeah, there was a year where they didn't have that. They still would show animation, but it would be like a short they'd run ahead of a feature and stuff. So Sylvan and I were like, well, that sucks. Let's do one. And I don't know, she's good at with the funding and the grant writing and stuff, and I suck at that. So she'd always handle that part of it, but I would come in and help her with programming it. So that first year, we just reached out to friends that we knew that had made films.
Yeah.
As many, and emphasis on local people. Like if someone was local and they made a film, we have to come up with a pretty good reason to not show it. Basically, like we really want to support local filmmakers, local animators, and there's a whole philosophy behind that too. But yeah, a lot of the films we showed that year were from all over. We know people from all over, and we called it Animation with Love at that point. We wanted to come up with a name.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I think the name Animation with Love was really to try and bake into it this idea that it's just make sure you had some heart, that we're not some big, not commercial, we want films. And also what we were looking for films specifically, like when we did turn films down that applied, we're looking for films that had, an honest kind of heartfelt kind of thread in them. Right.
Okay.
If it's a bit too clever or a bit too sarcastic or too intellectual, maybe, then it was less appealing to us. And we're looking, in terms of curation, we were throughout, we did Animation with Love for, I think, 6 years, 7 years. There's a couple of gaps there. But yeah, basically looking for an honest, kind of heartfelt investment, emotional investment in the films.
Yeah.
And that was the through line that we kind of went for. And that's still there-ish. Well, at a certain point, there was a year or two where I wasn't involved, and Sylvan was running it on her own. And then Phil Stamp, who runs the animation studio downtown that was formerly DHX, they've been reorganized. They're now at their own local new company called Island of Misfits.
Okay.
But I think at the time this started, it was still DHX. Anyways, he got involved and said, what, we should make this big. Let's make this a real festival. And so Sylvan reached out and said, hey, you got to come and help me figure this out. So we put together this committee, which Phil was on that first year, and reimagined what the festival could be. Because I've been to, there's Annecy in France, and in Canada we've got the Ottawa International Animation Festival. It's a big deal.
Okay.
And these festivals, they'll also have a business component. So there's like a show that goes along with it. So again, you can go there and meet people from all the big players, and they'll be there to hear pitches and talk about making shows and watch new films and meet, the hot new talent coming up and stuff.
Yeah.
And Halifax is not quite there, but as has been said a lot, Halifax kind of punches above its weight a lot.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, we've got 5, I think, animation studios in Halifax. So like the industry part of that is significant. So kind of, our 5-year plan is to build up the business part of AFX to be something. So yeah, maybe we'll get execs coming for the week, to stay and do some keynotes, and hear some pitches and just do some business networking. But yeah, we know we got to build up to that. And then, COVID this year, it's kind of a gut punch. So we didn't have any live events, but we've been trying to keep it going with some online stuff. But yeah, so we built it, like a weekend thing. So that first year, it's the whole Mother's Day weekend, basically. We came up with a few different events that would be at different venues. So we do that screening of that same screening that was originally Animation with Love. It's now called Vegan Delights.
Okay.
But it's a curated collection of animated films that we sit down and we look through all the applications and kind of put together a program. But we'll usually now we'll have a feature or two will come in, because Sylvan, her her other kind of day job is Carbon Arc, which is the independent cinema. So she's plugged into that whole world of bringing in films and screenings and all that stuff. So we kind of put all those, and then there's other people we brought in as well. Like it's a nice broad range of voices and expertise on the committee there. And yeah, so make it into a weekend thing. There's an event that was my brainchild, toot my own horn here, but it was a really fun event called Saturday Morning Cartoons.
Yeah.
Which basically it's a bit more of an industry kind of heavy thing. Like basically the idea is that we've got all these animation studios in town here doing world-class work, cartoons that go on TV and no one knows about it, right? And it's because animators are essentially people in headphones on computers,
Yeah.
Like when a film comes to town, there's trucks and there's people and there's lights and they're like, oh wow, that stuff's going on. So I thought, well, it's a great way to put a spotlight on the work that's done here. So I just reached out to the other studios and said, any cartoons you made for kids, just get permission from your clients, but we'll have a screening at the library. So we have and we kind of packaged it like Saturday Morning Cartoons, which it's not really a thing anymore, but those of us of a certain age maybe can remember Saturday morning. You get up and go downstairs and turn the TV on. Mom and dad are asleep, and you get your Fruit Loops and watch cartoons on Saturday. Right? And now it's whatever Saturday every day now, I guess.
24-hour cartoon channels at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a block on Saturday. So we kind of try to recapture that energy a bit with this event, and we'd serve cereal, and people were encouraged to come in their jammies and bring their stuffed animals or pillows or whatever. Yeah. And it's a really fun family event, and all the cartoons that we show, they're all on the big screen, and they're all made in Halifax. So it's a great way to kind of showcase a part of an export industry that's here in Halifax.
Cool.
Because visibility is like a huge thing. Like if a lumber mill is going to close, it's like there's a big stink about it because it's like jobs and stuff. But if an animation studio closes, no one hears about it.
Yeah.
Like it's because you're not. I think those industries, good on them. They do a good job of being in the public eye. And I feel like when we had that film tax credit crisis a while ago, I think it was a bit of a wake up call that you got to let the people see you so they can love you.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we can make the community, and it's a holistic thing as I see it. I mean that's a big part of AFX for me is an animation community. It's not about a trade organization or something, which is fine, and they do what they do. But I feel like a community is many parts, right? So you've got your filmmakers, you got your artists, you got your professionals, and you got your audience, and it forms an ecosystem, right? So a healthy community will, create films that speak to that community, and that community will then give feedback to the artists. You got fine artists who are got their process, trying to find their voice, and find an authentic way to express that and make people, see things that maybe they didn't think of before. And then you've got professionals, doing commercial art for clients when it's more of a trade. And I think they all feed each other when it's healthy, right? Yes. And that's to me, I try and bring that conversation into the AFX thing. And we spend a lot of time thinking about what's our mission and what's our mandate, and it's a lot about that, about the art and the industry of animation, and finding ways to make it matter to people personally. So we try and do a lot of workshops, a lot of events for people to participate and learn from each other and talk to each other and just make those connections, right?
Yeah. Cool.
So it didn't happen this year. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But we did do a thing called an Anajam, which is something we can do remotely, where we just put out a call for people to send us an animated clip from, I think, maximum 30 seconds. and we're going to stitch them all together to make one big film. And usually with an Anagem, there's some sort of rules or something so that, you know, you're going to get submissions that'll work well together. So with this one, basically your animated frame should start and end with just a white page with a black circle on it.
Okay.
So you start with that black circle on the page, transform it however you want. You know, maybe it opens and it's an eyeball, or maybe you draw a face on it. Maybe the circle goes away and you have something totally different, and then the circle comes back. Because that way, at the front and end of each piece, you know, you're going to have a circle, so you can sort of line them up, and then there'll be some continuity there.
Right.
And then we're going to put music under it. So we're piecing that together now. So it should be fun.
Cool.
We'll share it once it's ready.
All right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So if you were to give like one big piece of advice to someone pursuing a career in animation, what would that be?
I guess one piece of advice.
If there's more than one.
Well, you got to love drawing. You have to, I think. I guess it's not necessarily true if you're in 3D. I've never really worked on a 3D production, but there's a lot of work there. And then also a part of the conversation is there's video games too. Like there's a lot of animators that work at like Ubisoft. They've got a big studio downtown. So scratch that about drawing, but love what you do. Really, you have to love it like a lot. You can't be like, ugh, I got to turn on this computer. You know, like if you're not excited to get in there and do it, it's going to be a grind, and you're not going to do good work. So yeah, find the joy in it, and find a way. Realizing that, you know, if you're going to be an animator professionally, it's commercial art, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not doing it for you. You're doing it for a client, right? So there's someone that needs a product, and they don't have the skills to do it, and so they're basically, you're renting your skills to them.
Yeah.
So it's about. That's a good piece of advice. When I taught for a while at Da Vinci, and one of the things I would work on with my students was taking critique, because I know, you know, if you're in high school and you like drawing and you're artistic, then that's kind of what makes you special, right? You're like, oh, you're the kid that draws, right?
Yeah.
And then that's
Everybody
how you get by. Yeah. Like, oh man, let's go, you know, she can draw, you know, really cool, you know, a picture of Sailor Moon or whatever. You know, it's a way that you get cred with your students, and where you stand out. And that's great. And that's high school. Because when you go to, now you're in a school where everyone is that kid, you know?
Yes, exactly.
So you're not special anymore.
No.
You got to push yourself to like, all right, now you got to get good, you know? Because it's a whole industry of people that are always, and the people that I see that are really successful, they're constantly looking at other people that are above them and like, how did they do that? And trying to get better.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get better if you can't take a critique, you know, and especially in commercial art, right? Like, so you're working on a show, you're going to get notes from the director or your supervisor or whoever, and they're not always going to be nice. You know, I mean, ideally they are. People should, you know, be polite to each other at all times, but sometimes they're just not, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, that happens in any creative field, I think.
For sure.
You know, it happened in theater. You know, I'd be in rehearsals and the director would go off sometimes, and it happens, and you just kind of roll with it. You know, it's the arts. You know, you got people have personalities. But so that was, if someone wants to be good in animation, you got to know that you got to take critique. So you put your heart and soul into it, make it as good as you can. And when it comes back going, I just don't like it, make it better. You know, it's your job to figure out what they mean. You know, Ideally they'd say, don't put their arm here, put their arm here, and make the smile, you know, 50% bigger. And then, okay, great. But they don't necessarily know, as the client, how to ask that. Yeah. They're just like, he doesn't look happy enough. Make him look happier. And then you have to go, okay, what do they mean? And put your ego down here. But you guys still have to keep your ego there, right? Because if you're not engaged, if you're not loving what you're doing and trying to show off a little bit, you know, then you're not going to have any heart in what you're doing, right? Yeah. So I feel like that's the biggest challenge I saw with young people getting into it, was letting go of that. Not even you got to hang on to that feeling that you're special, right? Like, I'm skilled. I'm an artist, you know. my voice is important, my skills are good. Got to hang on to that, but then realize there's a difference between fine art and commercial art.
Yeah.
You've got to work your ass off on both of them,
Yeah.
absolutely. But it's a different mindset. With fine art, you're trying to show something unique, something that's your voice. Find out what's your perspective, capture it, do something relevant, something
Yeah.
something it's completely from you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And commercial art's not that. You
Mm-hmm.
are like a tradesperson, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, be prepared either way. It'll work your butt off, I think.
Yeah. No,
and
for real.
and then there's the business skills, like being persistent and
Yeah.
not giving up. Like if you want to be an animator, work on your reel, work on your portfolio, and apply. And if they don't call you back, if you don't get it, don't give up. If it's what you really want, if you like, because they're not gonna. It's not like you're stepping up before some judge who then looks at you and goes, "No, you're not good enough. Get out." It's like it's a process, right? So you can go. Any feedback you can get is great, and listen to it, and then come back and improve. If they're like, I don't know, your animation, it just doesn't have any weight to it, then figure that out. We're in the information age, right? So look up weight, timing, look up, there's tons of videos and resources, figure out how to make it better, and then do another piece, do another little 10-second piece on your own, add it to your portfolio, and then come back. Like the people that hire for these studios, they're always looking for new talent. If they can work with you, they will, and every studio is different. They're going to have their own sort of levels of their own ways of training people and bringing people in. So, I think, be positive. And when someone says no, try and get a bit more information than a no, right? Like, okay, here you, thank you so much for your time. But what can I work on? Because I really want to do this. And there's no guarantees, but I think mostly people do want to help people out. And I know animation, like it's nuts right now. Like everyone's busy, everyone's hired. So there's a lot of vacancies. So I think now's a good time to, even if you don't necessarily have much skills, you can at least even find out, well, what do I need to learn?
Right.
And there's a lot of jobs in the industry too. Like if you don't know animation, there's still designers, there's still people that just do painters, there's if you're just artistic, there's lots of ways in. So it's all, just figure it out, be persistent, I think is key. And and ask for help, and hopefully people will I find creative people in the industries are pretty generous with their knowledge, and they want to help each other out.
Yeah, as long as
Just
you're
a
willing
matter
to
of
ask.
Yeah. If you don't ask, then they don't know you're there.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, exactly. So, how can people find you online?
Good question. How can you find me online? Well, let me think about that. I'm on Instagram. That's how I found you, actually.
Yes.
That Art Pays Me logo, it just really, every time it came up, I'm like, what is that? Art Pays Me. What's he saying? Who's this? And then I did a bit of digging and found you. So on there, I'm Rootwood. That's kind of my handle on Instagram. But I'll just give out my email. Who cares? Yeah, so you can email me at jason.dylan.edwards@gmail.com.
Cool.
That's my personal email, so my work one is different. But and if you have any questions about animation or need some advice, I'm totally down with that. I try and make time for people when they do when they send in like a script or an idea. it's funny, just with the internet, being the way it is, and people, they get a bit of information about, directors and films getting made, and there's a lot of opinions about, what how things, how the decisions get made to make what gets made and what doesn't get made. Like, oh, I can't believe they canceled this show. It's because of this and because of that. And having been on enough of these meetings now and trying to figure it out, it's so complex. Like, there's so much that goes into why a show gets canceled or not, or why it gets made or not. Like if they adapt your favorite book and they're like, oh, they screwed it up. There's so many decisions behind why they do that, and it's and it's hard to explain that to people without sounding like you're talking down to them. It's just, there's so much like, it took me years to figure this out, from working in it, that, there's no job on, the movie set of the person who just says what color everything should be,
Yeah.
Like, it's this whole machine, and it's basically, because these things, they cost so much, they have to make their money back. And there's, with art, there's no guarantees, right? People are going to like it or they're not. You don't know until it's done.
Yeah.
But so they're all trying to hedge their bets, like, we're going to spend $100 million making this. Well, our data says, people like, the color green, and they like our main character to be like this and like that. And it ends up sort of, those decisions all end up, sometimes not making sense to the audience. They're like, I can't believe they screwed that up. But I don't know how I got talking about that, but whatever. My brain goes off.
No, it's cool, but it's a interesting point. It's just like, I on my end, from a graphic designer, a lot of times when I see design firms and agencies get blasted for a crappy visual identity that comes out, I'm always like, I've been on the other side of that. And sometimes you just get to a point and you realize the client is going, they have a specific vision in mind. They've got this stakeholder that they're trying to appease, and that person that's asking for this and that. And you end up putting something out that you don't necessarily think is the best thing, but like, it's a client. You got
job. Paid. So.
At the end of the day, it's got to get out. I'm not going to do prima donna thing and say, I'm walking away from this.
Yeah. Well, you just have to make sure you at least have your say. You're like, look, it's your money, it's your thing. As a designer, I think it should be like this, and you're free to. But ultimately, it's your decision. So.
Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't plan out. They say, that's fine, thank you for your input, but this is what we want. All right.
Yeah. Well, then sometimes they're right. That's the thing.
Right. Well, that's the other thing.
That stupid thing, it works. Okay. Yeah. Well, all right.
I've definitely had that happen where I was like adamant that something was the wrong approach, and the client pushed for it, and they were right at the end of the day. And so that always makes me pause a little bit, and I resist.
Maintain some humility.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Dylan, thank you very much for jumping on Art Pays Me.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll keeping an eye on the Instagram feed, putting out good stuff.
Thank you. If I can actually find time to make some new stuff. Oh man. Thank you so much for listening to the Art Pays Me podcast. Thank you to Langy Beats for the theme music. If you got anything out of this show, please rate, review, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. The more you do this, the more reach the podcast gets, and the more artists I can help learn to make a living at what they love. If you want to know more about what I do, hit me up at artpaysme.com or at artpaysme on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest. See y'all next time.